kids. So my family is sixth generation. So for all intents and purposes, South Africa is my home, and that's what I identify with, and I don't know anything else. So have you heard of the concept of apartheid?
No.
The word apart, meaning that people lived apart. So based on your race, you were kind of designated to live in certain areas. The kinds of amenities and facilities and services that you receive from government were different. The things that you could do and the types of work that you could do were different. So,
but what about all those families, which is that if you come from a developing country and you come to a developed country?
I think bold people grow faster and stronger people grow faster. Hello everybody. I am Monisha and I'm back with another power-packed episode. And this time, power does not even begin to cover it. I have a super couple sitting right beside me. And I should tell you, when I started writing this intro, I might have had a slightly self-esteem meltdown because these people have achieved so much so that I cannot actually record just one episode out of their achievements. I had to do multiple. Did I not talk about self-esteem? That is this. Yeah, but never mind. But meanwhile, I would like to acknowledge that we are currently recording this episode in Coquitlam today, which is from the ancestry traditional territories of Coquitlam First Nations. And we acknowledge their presence here. Thank you. And now I'm going to take on my sheets, my fancy sheets. I'm going to read out something. I would love for you to pause and listen to it carefully because this takes a deep breath. Let's unpack this incredible duo. We have two people here. Vishad with royal blue jacket or coat. I don't know what it is called anymore. But the light blue one is Irshad. So these two people are husbands and fathers. And these two moved from South Africa. Did you have a question mark there? I know you did because it is so stereotypical. We see brown faces and call them South Asian, didn't you? But I know we are not there. We are going to demystify that. I'm going to read along. So, these people have incredibly supportive families in South Africa. Major shout out to King Wives. And together they launched a legal battle that shook the entire South African constitution. Did I not say power couple? Duh! But wait, there is more. Here in Canada, Vishad snagged the BC Good Citizenship Award. Meltdown again. And for his epic contributions to society. And get this, he's the first ever internal EDI Senior Manager for the City of Burnaby. Check boxes again. While he's implemented a ton of incredible initiatives, we will talk about it more in the upcoming episodes. Meanwhile, Irshad is no less. He's a true super total rock star in itself, and he works for BC Hydro, and he is the chief tech architect. He's been leading the charge to make the city services more tech driven and inclusive for everyone. Phenomenal couple, isn't it? So I'm gonna put this paper away, or maybe I'll take it for some time, and I'm gonna ask some questions. And before we ask some questions, the basic Canadian small talk. How are you people?
We're well, thank you. How are you?
I am absolutely fabulous. Look at you two, very fancy and handsome.
Thank you.
This time I did not invite my guests to my apartment. I usually make them drive at least an hour, but this time I ended up driving. No, I ended up taking an Uber and drove down here almost an hour to see this beautiful place. Let me unpack this. This is their. What is this room even called?
So this would be sort of a more sort of relaxation, sort of Zen room, just a space for us to, if either of us or our son just wants a space to hang out with some music and decompress, that sort of space.
That space, mate. That space. I am recording in that space today, which is based out of Coquitlam. We will not be giving any addresses. All right. So let's begin this conversation. I told people that you are from a very supportive family in South Africa. And what is the most funniest or the most heartwarming story that captures and defines a family that you are? Anybody
There's
can go.
so many amazing stories.
Okay.
But I think the one that I would definitely pick that stands out, and it's still a conversation piece when we talk to friends, and we always bring it up. Our son Zarav was about 4 years old, and we traveled to Paris, to Euro Disney, on a holiday to take him to Euro Disney. And we stayed initially at a hotel that was on the premises nearby. We were there for about 3 days, and then the plan from there was to head out to see a little bit of Paris before we went back to South Africa. So he had this little taglet.
Okay.
That was his little taglet to fall asleep. He called it Inky.
Okay.
That was the name of Inky. So Inky went everywhere. Inky was in his bed. Inky went on every holiday we went to. Inky went in the car.
Oh.
It was his little soothing piece to fall asleep. So in the rush of leaving the Euro Disney Hotel to the hotel in Paris, which is approximately about a 2-hour drive.
Don't tell me you left Inky.
Inky was still fast asleep within the sheets of the bed, and Inky did not make it into the bag.
Oh, God.
And we only realized this when it was time for him to go to bed.
Oh, God.
Yes, so now in Paris at the hotel, it's bedtime, and there's no Inky.
Oh, God.
And I think a testament to just knowing how important he is to us, but also like our commitment to him is Irshad is always the very quick thinker between us. The next thing, it was just like you, Uber was called, the hotel was called. We're very fortunate that the hotel was fantastic in getting the Inky to the car, into the Uber. We waited and the Uber arrived, and the cutest thing ever was the driver was so sweet. He actually put Inky into the seat belt, buckled him into the back seat. So when we went down to collect him with Zarav, he was buckled into the back seat. Inky sitting there, and that's how we got him. Yeah, so I think that's one of our funniest stories.
Oh my goodness, that's an amazing story. And I should say, I've never had such funny stories in my life. My parents were very strict. My parents were like, study.
We had the same, don't worry.
Yeah. Parents, mate. Parents, right? Irrespective of how funny they are, parents. Okay. All right, that's a very beautiful story. And quick thinker you are. And I'm already setting up some few questions in my head to go ahead. But that's a beautiful story, and that describes how close you are as a family, and that also describes that however you see family as son, a baby, a child is very important piece, and Inky is the most important part of the story. That's beautiful. So I'm gonna go a little deeper, right? So like I said in introduction, the moment you see brown skin me, brown skin behind the camera, brown skin you, the assumption is we're all South Asian. When I say South Asian, some of you might not know there are multiple countries, not just India. that is a stereotype too. I have been there. So there is Pakistan, there is Sri Lanka, there is Afghanistan, there is Bangladesh, there is also India, and there are multiple other countries which comes under South Asia. And it's very natural to assume that people who have brown skin are South Asians. You are South Africans.
South African, yeah.
How have you ever experienced that change or that stereotyping when you were in South Africa or after you moved to Canada? And how was that experience, if there was any at all?
I think in South Africa, the environment's different. I think people appreciate and recognize that brown-skinned people are South African.
Okay.
If you go back in history, the indentured laborers were taken from India in the 1800s. So my family is 6th generation. So for all intents and purposes, South Africa is my home, and that's what I identify with, and I don't know anything else. So in South Africa, I think there's that general understanding and appreciation. However, when we moved here, as you said, it's not so clear, right? Like there's assumptions made about, you must be South Asian. And then, as you said, South Asia is made up of multiple countries. So is Africa. Many people assume Africa is
a country, not a continent. Oh, to out there, it's a continent, mate. Continent,
And South Africa is a country, right at the tip.
Near the Indian Ocean.
Yes.
Yes.
I got my geography right. Yeah. And how was it for you? Was it any different?
I think, again, when we sort of were growing up, again, being fifth generation South African as well, very much I identify as South African initially. With the movement, when we got here, it was almost exciting in a way, because people would come up to you and they would say, okay, so are you from India? But I detect a British accent. So did you go from India to study in London and then move here?
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I'm South African. And then they were like, oh, so you're a Smiley? And I'm like, no, that is Kenya, another part of Africa. But I think what I always appreciate is also when the conversation starts. You get lots of folks who open up to ask the conversation, and they're asking from curiosity in a good space to understand. So that's always very exciting. But very similar, but to date as well as an assumption. Naturally, when anybody meets me, it's the assumption that I'm South Asian.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. This is the demystifying part, and I want our audience to understand. I have said this multiple times. I'm gonna say it again, mate. You got no choice, right? Canada is in itself is a very multicultural country. It's an indigenous land, 100%. It's a multicultural country, and people from all over come. And just like both of you mentioned, in 1800s, uh, for the development of the country, Indians were moved and landed in South Africa, and generationally they have lived. And also, when you mentioned that specifically, only South Asians move to South Africa, or do we have other country people living in South Africa and there is a cultural difference there? How is it?
Yeah, South Africa is a melting pot. There were many people that moved from the Netherlands even before the 1800s, and that gave rise to the Afrikaner people in South Africa, people from Britain. So South Africa has got a rich history, also a very troubled history, a lot of adversity and challenges that the country had to work through to eventually get to a point where there was democracy and equality in the country. So yeah, it's a melting pot, many different cultures that coexist and live together in South Africa.
Okay.
Yeah. I think, but on the piece of like diversity, when you look at that sort of piece in the sense of like Canada, and you mentioned how diverse we are, that is so true, because as much as in South Africa being this melting pot that Irshad mentioned, it is very distinct in the sort of race groups, demographics of folks, whereby here there's such an array of diversity and people from all across the world. It's just that the immigration piece here is so much newer to what sort of so-called immigration, if you want to call it, or indigenous laborers going over to South Africa. It's generations ago.
Okay. So, if I may ask, because we have spoken about how multicultural South Africa is, as well as how multicultural Canada is, if I may ask, how has that multicultural shaped you as people?
I think we're a lot more aware and able to kind of commingle and just get on with people a lot more easily. It's okay to kind of ask questions and be curious and understand more about where a person comes from and their culture and background. It's not foreign to us.
Okay.
I think.
Okay. So being respectfully curious is in their nature. That's what I hear.
Yeah.
That is beautiful. And I also remember, like you mentioned, it has rich culture and troubled history as well. Can you give me some examples of the troubled history that you're specifically talking about? Because most of my audience, I'm sure many of us are naive and we don't read specifically about different cultures. Not that they don't want to, but they just are involved in their own culture a little bit more. They just reject all cultures, and that is in a way disrespectful to other cultures as well. So can you give me some examples of what kind of troubled history, or there are differences, and how it has evolved over the years?
So have you heard of the concept of apartheid?
No.
No? The word apart,
Okay.
meaning that people lived apart. So
Okay.
based on your race,
Mm-hmm.
you were kind of designated to live in certain areas. The kinds
Okay.
of amenities and facilities and services that you receive from government were different.
Mm-hmm.
The things that you could do and the types of work that you could do were different. So
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot of segregation.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were white, you got
Mm-hmm.
a lot of privileges. If you weren't, you didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the history of South Africa. But also there was a lot of violence
Okay.
and, you know, there was a lot of prejudice as well. And so that kind of colors the history of South Africa. And so that was kind of the context under which we grew up still, because up until the 90s, 1994 was when South Africa became a democracy. Nelson Mandela was the first
Which is basically
black president.
30 years back.
30 years back, but
Huh?
I mean, at that time we were in school, right? So like we were already part of that whole system, and things don't change overnight.
Yeah.
So even though the constitution changed at that time, it took a long time for the country to actually see real change. So those are some of the challenges, and of course it has lasting impacts on the country as a whole, because you've got generations of people that have not had the ability to go to university or even finish school, the quality of education, the type of healthcare that you received. It was not equitable, and so there's all of this that needs to be dealt with, right? And it's not easy.
You know, and like Irshad touched on two important pieces, and I think the one is like I remember my mom sharing with me that with us, like when we were younger, probably 7, 8 years old, when it came to even shopping in a store, there was white only shopping hours, and then non-white shopping hours. So you could shop only at that sort of stage. So, and that would be the shopping hours that were not the most appealing to anybody to be able to get to the stores or do the shopping was for the non-whites, right? That was our families. In that way as well, even if you drove down to a park or you went to a beach, there would be the white only section and then the non-white only section. And this was like as we grew up as kids, like I'm 46 years old, and as you mentioned, 30 years ago, this only changed. So I was 16 years old when all this happened. So those pieces. And then, like Irshad touched on the piece of the violence that was becoming an issue as well. And that stems also from the history of the country. When you look at it, you have to also look at the fact that the unemployment rate is so high. Not that in any way I say any type of violence should be, approved or it's okay and it's fine. But I think when you dissect a country for the amount of unemployment, and then you as a family need to feed your kids, that's when people end up, making these decisions. It's just unfortunately it is a really high rate of crime that is a high level of violence in the crime. So like something as simple as wanting your cell phone, it won't be just snatched from you. You'll be hurt immensely, if not even your life taken for the phone.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that is shocking. Certain things I was able to resonate with coming from the India that I am. We also have something called a caste-based system, which is similar to what you're explaining. So upper caste, there is lower caste. Who decides that? For what joy? I have no idea. Why do we have it? No idea. But so because of the caste system, some are considered superior, some are considered inferior, and superiors have more access to, like you said, they had more access to education, and they had more access to temples and different education systems. I think, like you rightly mentioned, change doesn't happen overnight, and India has come a long way from there on. But so much to do. But even when there is so much to do, in a way, from when I was growing up, like I would say 15, 20 years ago, I was fortunate enough to be living and growing with a family that did not expose me to this kind of discrimination, I would say. But so many of my friends were discriminated extremely, and I didn't know when I was growing up this is what was happening, because it was not happening to me, which is now I regret not learning about it. But there is always a time to start, and thank you for sharing that history that you experienced. Wow. Oh, I'm still shocked. However, now we mentioned and we spoke about some discriminatory events, and we also spoke about how different it was while they were growing up and how it is evolving. That reminds me, there are two types of people. One, complainers, right? People who complain and complain and complain and do nothing about it. Ain't me. So there are second type of person who are doers, who complain and complain and complain. I can complain. Like, trust me, I can complain. And so do many people. But they do something about it. So complainers and doers, right? So you, both of you, are obviously a doer. And like I mentioned in the introduction, constitutional law, you fought for a constitutional law change in South Africa. What was it like? Like, how did you make your voice heard?
Yeah, so that goes back to when our son was born. So we had Sirav through surrogacy, and many things had changed, and a lot of doors had opened up for us. Like, we were able to get married, we were able to have a child. However, when he was born, there wasn't any provision for me to take care of him. In terms of getting parental leave. At that time, it was just the only thing that was recognized was paternity leave, which would have been like 2 weeks, or adoption leave, which didn't apply because he wasn't adopted. So, can you imagine having a newborn baby and then 2 weeks and then you got to go back to work? So that was where the whole idea and the whole challenge started to grow from there. And so I had unpaid leave, and I stayed at home and took care of Sirav. So when I eventually went back to work, we had decided that we needed to start the process to try and make some changes so that other parents other fathers would also benefit and wouldn't have to deal with the same kind of challenges that we did. And so, it was a very long process, going through the court system, the various different legal things that needed to be done, and going to court and back and forth and all of that. So it took quite a while, but eventually the law was changed so that regardless of whether you're a father, male or female, you're able to get access that parental leave to take care of your newborn child. And I think what's also important is that it doesn't only apply to same-sex couples. Because in some cases, maybe if you're a heterosexual
the primary
couple,
carer can be either of them. You never
exactly.
know.
And so now the law makes provision for that.
And it also, on that, makes provision for not only parents who have had kids via surrogacy, but parents who've also had kids by adoption as well. So it also encompasses that sort of level. When I think back at it, I still remember when this was all happening, and one day Irshad and I were sitting on the couch at home, and we were saying that, okay, we were probably it was unfair, but we as a couple were in a fortunate space that even with Irshad having to take that leave unpaid, we sort of made it work still. We sort of made it work, so we felt we could. But I remember Irshad turning to me and he says, but what about all those families or those parents or those dads at that time when we were having the discussion that can't afford to be able to do it, or do not have the support system around them to sort of do it? What about them? And that's like, I remember when Irshad went back to work, and that's when it sort of started, and the whole piece. It only actually we immigrated in 2017. Only in 2018, in May, did we actually get news that the Constitution had actually changed. And I think one of the pieces that was like kind of nice was we felt that although we immigrated and we are now, in Canada and curriculum was home and BC was home, that little, well, I shouldn't say little change, that change was a little piece of what we left back in South Africa, like the sort of legacy sort of piece. And I also remember, like, sometimes I would look at Sarav and I would think to myself, like, does this little human know that because of his birth, a whole country's constitution has been changed? And, we've told him, and he obviously still doesn't grasp the concept, and hopefully someday he gets it.
Wow, see, Doers. Did I not say about Doers? This is Doers. And that's actually very strange. The country that I grew in had a lot of maternity policies, even adoption policies. There are good adoption policies now that even when I started working, there were good adoption policies. Before that, how was it? I have no idea. Maybe I should go back and check. And it is beautiful how you put it, right? Irrespective of what kind of couple you are, primary carer can be anybody. It doesn't really mean just because a woman gave birth from her JJ does not mean she is the only person to take care of the baby. Yeah, the other partner, irrespective of their gender, can actually take care of the baby. And primary carer also needs equal amount of time to actually spend with that baby.
For sure.
Talking about time, how long was this whole process of constitution? How long did it take?
So
how
it was
many
about
years?
7 years.
7 years.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah. And I have to just tap Irshad on the shoulder there, because in all honesty, between the two of us, all the work and all the effort and most of it came from his hard work with it,
Yeah.
And like 7 years later, putting yourself through that, it's a lot.
7 years. 7 years of legal battle, you people. 7 years. That's a lot of years. Oh my God. 7 years. In 7 years of my career, I was actually equivalent to nothing because I didn't know shit. And 7 years, they actually changed constitutional law. Self-esteem. Talk about self-esteem.
And there's moments where you think, you know what, let's throw in the towel.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
there's moments where, because it's 7 years later, right? There's moments where you think, throw in the towel. But then it takes you back to a place of, you know what, doers.
Yeah.
If we started something, we have to follow it through.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Beautiful. I have to create a shot on this. I'm gonna upload this because this needs to be said out loud with pride, and I'm gonna do that. But meanwhile, they have spoken about a lot of things, how their culture was growing up, what are the differences they experienced when they were teenagers, and how tiny human made a life-changing decision amongst them and changed the law and all of that. And there comes a time when they actually mentioned in 2017 they immigrated to Canada. The first question I was asked when I was immigrated is, do you have Canadian experience? I don't know why they ask it, but I did not have any. Were you asked those questions?
Yes, definitely. And it's hard to have Canadian experience if you just immigrated.
Yeah. Tell me
and it's also hard if no one's willing to give you the Canadian sort of experience as well.
Yeah.
And it's something you still get heard of very often to this date, to many sort of newcomers. I'm very passionate in that sort of space, in moving work forward in that space as well for newcomers, because I still see myself technically as a newcomer. We just had 7 years.
Yeah.
Very proud to be Canadian, also still very proud to be South African.
Absolutely.
That being said, we had immigrated at a stage where I was already 40. So at 40 years old, you have already established yourself in a sort of space, but also a head space, right?
Yeah.
In the sense of your confidence, of who you are, what you bring to the table. And then you immigrate and you start applying for jobs and you don't hear from anyone.
Yeah.
No one replies. And I was applying from within Canada, already on my PR in Canada. And you don't hear from folks, you don't hear from people. And then you start going down the list from what you qualified for to the next stage. And you still don't hear from anyone. And then because you have to tick the question when you're applying, do you have Canadian experience? And the truthful answer is, no, I don't. And then you start going down the list and down the list. Not that I believe that any job that anyone does is more important than anyone else, but it's your own credibility to where you are at. And eventually I had started looking at sort of retail because it was the only sort of sector that I thought maybe I'd find something that would allow me the hours. No support system, no one around us. Irshad was already working. He was downtown 5 days a week, long hours. We had our son. And we immigrated for a better life for him and for us, let's be honest about it, but honestly for him. We wanted to get him away from violence and we wanted to get him into a space where he was safer. So that being said, we knew primary was getting him to school, fetching him to activities, but we came to a space that was incredibly expensive. Canada is expensive to live. We both had to work to make sort of, a better life for ourselves as well. So yes, eventually went into retail and very appreciative that I got the job in retail, but it humbles you a lot.
Yes, it does.
It definitely humbles you a lot, especially coming from a place where you already see yourself in a position where you worked hard for, and then not that working in retail is in any way disrespectful, but it definitely humbles you when you're doing sort of work that you had already done when you were already 18 or 19 years old or 20 years old. It actually also, your mental health it messes with in some ways as well. You go through so much of, why did we do this? Why did I leave? And you question yourself. And yeah, I'm grateful for that first step. But then as a doer, you continue to do and do and do and prove yourself.
Yeah.
And at a very different space today, which I'm very appreciative for. But I think that being said, as well as a family unit, it's made us stronger as a family unit, our immigration.
Very I can resonate to a lot of things there because I am also a newcomer. I'm only 2 years in the system. But when you were having the conversation, you mentioned that Irshad already had a job and he was working in downtown, long hours, 5 days a week. Sounds like consulting to me. Well, when did you get a job and did you have a job before coming to Canada?
Yeah, I was fortunate. I know that a lot of people are not as fortunate as me, so I'm very appreciative of the fact that I was able to secure employment before I immigrated. So I moved first, and Vishad and Irshad followed afterwards.
3 months later.
And so
crucial 3 months, eh? I am sure it was very difficult. We will talk deep, but the next episode. Yeah. But and you mentioned that you got a job before you moved to Canada. Does that even really happen anymore? I don't know. But it is beautiful that you got a job. Now that we have spoken, we are speaking about new immigrant experience and how it was challenging. Was it challenging for you having that you got a job before itself? Was it challenging for you?
Yeah, like as Vishal was just explaining, even for me, although I had a job, I still had to take a couple of steps back in my career from where I was in South Africa at that point in time to where I started off when I moved to Canada. So, again, just kind of reconciling that in your head. So that was challenging. It was also, as you had mentioned, Canadian experience, right? So although I had a lot of experience and I'd done some very large, complex projects back in South Africa, I think in some ways there's just an assumption that if you come from a certain part of the world, the experience or the education that you have is not as good. It's not equivalent. It's not relevant And I think that that's a very unfortunate assumption, because the reality is the types of things that I was doing back in South Africa at that point in time was already quite advanced and sophisticated compared to how things were here. Right. So I think it's a big learning lesson, that we shouldn't be too quick to make assumptions.
Yeah, I think, and what Irshad's saying as well is, I think when it comes to that assumption, is the assumption that if you come from a developing country and you come to a developed country, there's the assumption that coming from a developing country, your experience or your education is not as credible as obtaining it in a developed country already. Which I actually disagree with completely, because I think when you come from a developing country, there's so many other adversities that you face on that journey of experience, on that journey of education, that actually I think makes you even stronger to deal with anything.
Like you rightly mentioned, actually, so true. And like you rightly mentioned, I was asked the Canadian experience question all the time. When I had the chance, I even asked that in a panel to the panel members. They did not get the joke then. But however, so the Canadian experience thing, what I would say is, yes, I've also taken roles which are 6 years behind what I was doing, and I have taken that role. And like you mentioned that because you're coming from a different country, developing country, your education is not that credible, or it's not dealt with credibility. And I think so many of us feel that way. I have felt that way, my husband has felt that way, my friends have felt that way. And it is so disrespectful. You people, you managers, you are disrespectful to us. I'm angry in a way, but what can I do about it? Nothing, eh? But however, thank you so much for sharing, because these are very simple things like humbling experiences and gathering information, irrespective of which, being in your mid age and achieving things that you've already achieved, and leveling down just because you want a better life for the next generation. So many people don't appreciate it, and appreciate it, please. And thank you. So you mentioned, while we were speaking about it, you also mentioned that you wanted your son Zirav. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Oh, thank God. So your son Zirav, he was the reason you wanted to move to Canada, and you wanted him to have a better life away from violence, etc., etc. And you wanted him to have a better life. And how does he have a better life? How old is he now? Does he have a better life now? Does he appreciate it? Does he understand the differences? Anything at all?
He's almost 13.
Oh, a teenage. Hey.
Oh, yes.
Now, all the best to you too.
He fortunately settled in really well.
Yeah.
I think he was at the right age.
Yeah.
He missed his friends and family a little bit, but then very quickly re-established new friends, and for him, this is home.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been in Canada longer than he's lived in South Africa.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and he's still very connected to his family, his cousins, his grandparents back in South Africa. But this is home.
This is home.
Yeah.
I think definitely what Irshad touched on was, with immigration, there's that age.
Yeah.
I mean, we all parents, right? If you're about to immigrate, there's that big worry about how my kids will settle, what will happen, will they miss people, will they miss things, will they miss their school? I think we also don't give credibility to kids on how resilient they are.
Yeah.
And that's what we saw with Zirav, like coming over. What you see with the resilience is, like we saw in Zirav, was just the ability to fit in. And I think us as parents, like when you come over with a younger kid, your pace of settling, you do it even faster, because you want to be settled for this little human, you know, to be comfortable.
Yeah.
So that was it worked both ways. He was comfortable. He did, again, as Irshad mentioned, missed a few people, but very quickly settled. And he sees Canada as home first. He does recognize he's South African and he proudly owns it, but he definitely does see Canada as home first, and he's fitted in well. And yes, he'll be 13 in November. Yeah. So
all the
a
best
very,
to you.
should I call it exciting age? I don't know what that.
Were you exciting when you were 13? Let's start there.
No.
I was a brat child when I was 13. I think my parents would have hated me for the kind of behavior I put up with. I was a very brat child. I was very arrogant, and I was the assumption that women, girls, because 13 years old, right? Girls are supposed to be at home, and you are supposed to be doing the things the stereotyped girl should be doing. I was so different. They, even all my extended family members, even today, say that I'm a brat child. I own it.
You should.
Yeah, I'm a proud brat child, and that's why I'm a brat woman as well. Oh, that came out wrong. I think bold people grow faster, and stronger people grow faster, and brave people grow faster. Brave and bold means the same thing. Why did I repeat it? I don't know. But however, brave people, hardworking people grow faster, and that is something that you have done, and that is something Zira was also done with Inky beside him.
Yes.
Inky. Inky's photo is gonna come up again. Okay. Now we have spoken about a lot of things. So let's turn the tables. Ask me away if you have any question.
I think from like my side and what I would like to just like bring forward and ask you, and I'll tell you where this is coming from. So I recently attended an event, and at this event there was opportunity to meet a large number of immigrants, some who are here already for 25 years, 30 years, and when we shared stories on our immigration journey, they were excited to hear that myself, who's an immigrant of 7 years, my story is so different to their story 25 years ago, in the sense that my story at 7 years much more comfortable, much more inspiring, much more a happier version of their story from 25 or 30 years ago. As an immigrant that's here 2 years ago, what excites me is that we as a society, as a province, as a country, at least moving forward, that my experience was better than 30 years ago. So I'm hoping your experience from 2 years ago is better than my experience from 7 years ago.
Okay.
So I'd love to know like your mindset right now for yourself and your husband. Like, how do you all feel?
Oh, that's a deep question, isn't it? I should say, like you said, 7 years ago, some people find it inspiring. I moved only 2 years ago, and so many people find my story inspiring, which I don't know how, but they do. But I have to give you an example. I moved to Canada, and as a new immigrant, in 4 months' time, I landed my first job, six-figure job as a new immigrant. So I did not get a chance to experience the humbling experience of working in retail. I wish I did, but I didn't. And I got this opportunity. I was like, I remember applying through immigrant services, support system, and all of that.
Yeah.
And some of them, some career coaches gave me example, and some career coaches gave me an advice saying that you should, how do I nicely put it, dumb down your resume. Or miss out some accomplishments so that it looks like an entry level. Still, I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, why would I do that? I'm not going to do that. I prefer, I am much better than this. I'm not going to show whatever you are telling me I'm going to show. And then I was very arrogant about it. I was very adamant about it. I was very resilient about it. All these nice words I have to put in because adamant and arrogance doesn't define me. when I was very ambitious and I said, no, I'm not going to do it. I want more, which means I'm going to work hard for it. So I changed my job search strategy. Whatever my career coach said, I am not going to follow yours. I'm going to create my own. And I did my work and I was able to secure my first job. I was able to secure my first job, 6-figure job, after I moved to Canada. Now,
So, I was going to say, so that's great. Like, as we move sort of forward, like from a 30-year story to 25 to 7 to 2, it does get more inspiring to hear this. So that's exciting to hear that. I like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And turns out government of BC felt the same way. ISS of BC felt the same way. There is a story of me and video of me out there on YouTube that actually says my immigrant story is amazing. And it has my husband in it and my pet in it and everything. Yeah,
Must share.
yeah. I'm gonna put out a link in the description.
There you go.
And that was an experience. So that is something that drove me to podcasting as well. Like, if only such a small thing is inspiring for people,
Yeah.
what could it mean to have a journal of stories out there to show to the world that immigrants are achieving so much in Canada? You gotta know. And that is why my journey moved towards podcasting again. Yes.
Well then.
Thank you. And any more questions?
Mr. Vishad, has any?
What would you say is one of the most surprising things for you?
In Canada?
In Canada, yeah. When you moved here, what did you find to be surprising?
This is going to be a very stupid answer, but I'm gonna say with all honesty.
There's no stupid answers.
Oh, you're gonna say it's stupid
fine.
answer. No. You're gonna say it's stupid answer. I'll tell you why. I still cannot order a coffee in Starbucks or Tim Hortons. I still find it very confusing. I don't know how. I'm like, what are you even saying? What are those words coming out of your mouth? I'm like, what is a pump? What do you even mean by sugar? So when we order coffee, I'm a chai person, but when we order chai, you just have to say chai and then I'm gonna get chai in India. Okay, that's it.
Yeah.
And I didn't know. I'm not a coffee person, so I didn't know so many types of coffees existed in the world. And when I moved to Canada, I am like, oh my God, this is too much. The reason why I'm saying this is decision fatigue. There are so many things out there, and I don't know what to decide. I go completely blank. I'm like, I don't know what. And then my love comes out for my husband. I'm like, whatever you want, honey. I'm like, you order whatever you want, honey. I just delegate the task to him, because even today, I cannot go to Tim Hortons and Starbucks and order a coffee. It is impossible. Or I'll just go whatever is the bottled drink available. I'll be like, let's take this. Thank you. That is the most surprising thing. The surprising thing was a lot of options, which puts you into decision fatigue.
No chai latte with soy milk and 1 pump of hazelnut for you.
Pretty sure you'll get there.
No, I don't want to get there. I'd like to stay. I am very change resistant about my chai. What is hazelnut? I know soy milk, and I should maybe remember this next time. Soy milk and chai latte and hazelnut. Okay, I'm gonna remember that. But I don't know. And when people say I just order chai latte and be like, sugar, I'm like, no, maybe yes. I don't know. Choose, dude. Choose yourself. I don't want to choose. That is something that was terrible, and I still feel terrible about it. And second most thing I would say is, this was a very standout experience. During one of the meetings in my previous company, we were having a team meeting, and this is more serious, not stupid answer. It's more serious. One of the meetings, we were discussing about what next steps to take, how can it be different from the previous experiences, what learnings we have had, the typical project management stuff. Yeah, so that was happening, and I, being shameless, I just asked out a question to someone from Nigeria and said, "Yeah, how would it happen in Nigeria? Maybe we can take away some lessons from there, and we can implement it here." The whole table looked at me just that minute, because nobody has ever asked that question to the team. Simple. What did your previous experience look like, and how can you implement it here? That was the question I asked. Just that I added Nigeria into the sentence. That's eight. And somebody looked at me and said, everybody, like the whole table looked at me and said, there was a moment of silence, and then I realized, no, we can carry some, there are different cultural differences. I understand that, but work is work.
Yeah.
And organizations, everybody wants to grow, everybody wants to pay, everybody wants to be rewarded, they want to perform, and we are all working towards the same goal. And if their experiences can add on to the work that we are doing here,
Totally.
it needs to be appreciated.
It's a diversity of thought, right? And a diversity of ideas, which is the important part. I mean, I think that's why like diversity around a table is so important, because we sometimes forget that we always think that the greatest ideas are here, the greatest accomplishments are here. You know, with immigration, that's the whole idea, is to bring in that diversity of thought, of ideas. So I love that you asked that. Fantastic.
Thank you. I don't think everybody appreciated it, but thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that. It has been a wonderful experience talking to these two people. We are not done yet. You might assume we are done, but we are not done yet, because these two people, I'm inviting them again for another episode and another episode, two people separately, because they have their own achievements and we got to capture that, and it is important to understand. So, until next time, mates. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. We are going to be back again. Bye.